if I want to be a real DEA agent, I got to go to the motherland, right? I got to go to the mecca of drug trafficking, which was Colombia. There was this massive load of probably 24,000 pounds of cocaine. Suspicion a lot of times in these drug cartels will get you killed. Pablo basically told them, we're going to war. We were able to move a television away, and behind in the closet, there was an entrance, and he was there with a pistol in each hand.
Today I spoke with Chris Feistl. Chris is arguably the most successful DEA agent in history. He personally arrested both of the Orejuela brothers, Miguel and Gilberto, who were the leaders of the Cali Cartel, the most powerful drug cartel of all time. He's portrayed in Narcos Season 3 on Netflix. He's the blonde DEA agent. That was Chris. Chris is part of narco history, and today he goes into detail about how he did it, what the show got right and what it didn't, and how he went on to take down not only the Cali Cartel, but the Norte de Valle Cartel and the AUN, the ultra-violent paramilitary group led by the infamous Castaño brothers. Chris unveils secrets about how they built a case around the most powerful drug trafficking duo of all time, the Orejuela brothers, and explains how it relates to the situation in Colombia today, which is currently exporting more cocaine than the Cali Cartel could have even dreamed of. Go pick up his best-selling book, After Escobar. It's a super fun, interesting read, available wherever you get books. And for a great bonus episode with Chris, head over to Patreon, patreon.com/TheConnectShow. Ladies and gentlemen, a man who played a pivotal role in the history of the war on drugs, the one and only Chris Feistl, right here on The Connect with Johnny Mitchell.
That the feds is some evil body, which, you know, there's an argument to be made there, but I love cops. Always have. Even the guys that arrested me, I was like, you guys are, let's hang out.
Yeah.
Let's hang out. Let me try to bribe you. No? Oh, I guess we're not friends. How do you say your last name?
Feistl.
Okay. So
Feist.
Are you from do you trace your roots to Northern Europe?
Bavaria, Germany.
Bavaria, there we go. Yeah, you're big German brawling. We got German in my family, 6'6".
Yeah, I would say you're a pretty big dude.
Yeah,
man.
yeah, dude. Germanic tribes. We still got the DNA. Colombia's back in the spotlight these days. They laid low for decades, but now the secret is out with everything that's going on with Venezuela. No, Colombia, you guys are moving blow. They have not stopped.
They have not. And I think what you've seen over the last 3 or 4 years is that the production in Colombia of cocaine has risen exponentially. So they're producing a hell of a lot more cocaine now than they did back in the 80s and 90s.
Yeah, because they have way more hectares to grow coca leaf. All of the guerrillas that controlled those areas even back then are now vertically integrated. They become the drug cartels. But you are a part of history, so we're happy to have you here. A lot of fans of season 3 of Narcos. Did you get a nice payout from that?
I did all right.
Okay,
yeah, I wish I got royalties though.
Yeah,
because that's where you would make the big money. But no Netflix
royalties
doesn't do
streaming.
that. No royalties.
That's how they get you.
Hey guys, if you could do me a quick favor, just take 1 second out of this episode and go subscribe to my channel, The Connect with Johnny Mitchell, and then turn on that alert bell so you get updated whenever we drop new episodes. All right, back to the show.
Okay, how did you become a Fed? How did you join the DEA?
Well, I grew up in northeastern Pennsylvania, and I went to college there. And while I was in college, I majored in criminal justice and political science. And my initial intention was to be an attorney, to be a lawyer. I wanted to be a sports attorney. I played basketball in high school and college. I had some connects, so I thought that would be a good way to make a living. But the summer of my junior year, we went down to the shore, the Jersey Shore. Mm-hmm. And, we do a little bit of surfing, hang out on the beach. And so you need some job, you need some money to support yourself while you're down there. And I ran into somebody in the street and they said, hey, you need to go to the municipal building because they have summer jobs for police officers and lifeguards. And I was like, what the hell would be a summer police officer job, yeah. Right? So I went in and I got the scoop and they hired seasonal police officers because, anywhere in the, Jersey or anywhere along the East Coast, the population in those beach communities swells during the summer. So they hire these seasonal or special police officers. So I'm like, hey, man, that sounds pretty good. Paid $5 an hour in 1984.
Wow.
Summer of my junior year. I was 20 years old. I wasn't even 21.
You couldn't pay me enough to police those animals on the Jersey Shore. Those Guidos, our finest Americans.
We had a lot of South Philly inhabitants that would come down there for sure. And so $5 an hour. And now check this out. I went to a 1-week training academy where they gave us classes on New Jersey state statutes and laws, and we qualified with a weapon, and I carried a gun after 40 hours.
Get the out of here.
Yeah. So as a 20-year-old kid, I thought, hey, man, this is pretty cool.
Did you pull that shit out?
There were a few times when we had to pull it out, but we never got into any kind of firefights as a seasonal police officer.
But is that exciting though, to draw down on somebody? I can't imagine the how drunk off power I would feel if you gave me just my personality, if you let me use that on people.
Well, I mean, you're using it to defend yourself or someone else. So the circumstance, if you have to pull your weapon, there's a good reason why you're doing it. So, but at the time, you're not really thinking about that. You're just going along with, training, instinct, and trying to get out of the situation that you're in. But when I was there, I was in a bar called the Fairview, and they had this thing called Beat the Clock. So from 9 to 10, drinks were a quarter, 10 to 11, 50 cents, and it went all the way up to $1. So I'm sitting in there, and this girl comes up and approaches me and asks if she wants to sell me methamphetamine. And I was 20 years old. I really didn't know what to do at the time. So I figured, hey, man, I'll just play along. What do you got? How much? Blah, blah. And, I say, I'll give me your number. I'll give you a call back. And so I went to the police department the next day, and I'm like, hey, man, this girl approached me in the bar, wanted to sell me a bunch of methamphetamine. Do you guys want to do anything with it? I'll pass it. Here's her phone number. And they said, well, we'll call her back, set up an undercover deal. And I'm like, I'm here like a month. I mean, what do you mean set up an undercover deal, right? So yeah, it's summer, right? And I parlayed that into an internship. So I call her and we set up this deal and up on the boardwalk. And that's what kind of really piqued my interest in law enforcement. Was I'm like, hey man, this is pretty cool. I can make a difference in what we're doing. And I started looking into various jobs with, FBI, DEA, CIA. And, I went back to school, I graduated. And
did you get a rush out of that though?
Yeah, a little bit, because it was something new. It was something that I had never done, obviously, before. Yeah. And, I really didn't know what I was doing, just like kind of wing it. But
because I know cops, feds, drug cops, they say, yeah, I can make a difference. I forgive that at such a young age. But I feel like a lot of guys get into it for the rush, because that is exciting, right?
I think so.
You're make believe. You're playing undercover. It's exciting.
That's fair. That's fair. But it can also be very dangerous. So you really need to be careful what you're doing.
It's part of the adrenaline.
So, but the more I looked into a career in law enforcement at that time, because then I said, you know what, I'm not going to go to law school for 3 years and then sit behind a desk. That's not me. I got a job in the meantime after I graduated college with Virginia Beach Police Department. So during that time, I applied with DEA, because DEA for me, I thought that's probably the best fit for me, because you can work overseas. They had probably back then maybe 60, or they were in 60 different countries, give or take. And I thought, man, what a great opportunity! I can learn a language. Yeah. I can travel the world. Yeah. As a federal agent, I can work anywhere in the United States. So that kind of really piqued my interest. And then, finally they called me and I got hired. I had just turned 24. Actually, they called me. I was 23. I reported to the academy. I was 24 years old with DEA.
Okay, so where'd they shoot you off to first after the academy?
Well, the academy, we went up into the FBI Academy in Quantico, Virginia. Mm-hmm. So we did about 17 weeks there, and my first assignment, so I got hired out of Norfolk, which was right next to Virginia Beach. Mm-hmm. So I went back there for 2 or 3 months, and then my first duty station was Miami. Yeah, it was great. So I grew up in Northeast Pennsylvania, so I hated the cold weather.
Yeah, it's awful. One of the most miserable places, I would say, on earth. And I put it up there with Gaza, Sudan.
It was just brutally cold. Yeah. And so when I was in the academy, what they do is they give you back then it's changed a lot over the years, but they give you a wish list and you kind of put down where you want to go, but that doesn't guarantee where you're going to go, right? So I put down, because I would always joke around. I go, man, if I get New York, I'm going to quit. I'm not going anywhere where it's cold. And, it was kind of like a running joke when I was in the academy. So I got my list and I put down Miami, Fort Lauderdale, West Palm, Tampa, and Fort Myers. Mm-hmm. So I think they got the hint that I wanted to stay in Florida. So they call you up in front of the room. I opened up my piece of paper and it said Miami. Thank God.
Hit the jackpot.
Good to go, yeah. Well, because look, back then, the late 80s, Miami was ground zero, right? For the drug so-called war, which it's not, and we could talk about that later. But, it's the home of Miami Vice. It was the home of the cocaine cowboys. Yeah. It was the place to go if you wanted to be a DEA agent
it was
back
rocking.
In the 80s. It was rocking.
Yeah.
We joke around that cocaine was falling out of the sky, basically, and literally it was because of all the air activity that was going on there. So it was a great place to learn the job, and that's what I wanted to do. Learn the job as quickly as I could, become proficient as a DEA agent, and, move on and go work overseas.
Right. Okay. So the whole goal was to work overseas.
Yes.
Was the Cali Cartel, the Orejuela brothers, were they already known as these superstars to the DEA by the time you went to Miami?
They were more in the shadows back then, but everybody knew about them. And if you look back in history, Pablo's decline pretty much started in the late 1980s or even 1990, 91 when he surrendered to Colombian authorities in June of 91. And by that time, and then when he escaped from Catedral in 92, not escaped, he just basically walked out the back door because there was nobody there. It was a manhunt after that, right? He was on the run. He was hiding. So he had lost a lot of his power and influence, by 91, 92. And the Medellín cartel, too, was pretty much destroyed by that point, right? You had Carlos Later had been arrested and extradited to the U.S. Rodríguez Gotcha was killed. Right. And the three Ochoa brothers, Jorge, Juan David, and Fabio, they were in prison. So Pablo was pretty much on an island by himself, being hunted down by the government because he had declared war against the Colombian government. So you saw the Cali Cartel was, even back then, was gaining a lot of market share. And everybody knew that once Pablo was done, the entire focus was going to shift to Cali.
And they had been selling drugs. They're a lot older than Pablo. They had already been in the game moving weight for as long as Pablo had been, like since the late 70s, I believe.
Early 70s.
Wow. Yeah, they started... It's a fascinating story of their beginnings. They started as like a kidnapping group.
Correct.
Right? That's wild because they're like these frumpy little, they look like soccer coaches. They're just these tiny little, look like harmless Colombian men, like, your father-in-laws, right? But they were like kidnapping rich Colombians, holding them for ransom. I think they were killing, they started off like killing like vagrants on the street. And then, they basically got in on the ground floor of the cocaine boom.
So in the late 60s, you're right, they formed this criminal group called Los Chemas. And it was Gilberto Rodríguez, his brother Miguel Rodríguez, and Jose Santa Cruz, Chepi Santa Cruz.
Right.
And they got into like the kidnapping and extortion business. So in 1969, they kidnapped the Paris-Swiss citizens, and they got about a $700,000 ransom.
Who were the Paris-Swiss citizens?
One was, I think one was a student, and the other was a professor, I think.
Wow. And were they doing the kidnappings themselves, or did they hire like
Well, they had
street
part of
goons?
their whole little criminal group that did it, but sure, they were the ones that were calling the shots.
Organizing it, okay.
Right. So after they got that $700,000 ransom, and Chepi Santa Cruz had kidnapped some people in Bogota as well.
Right.
So he had some money. So they got that money and they kind of pooled it into this drug trafficking little network. Wow. And they ended up meeting this guy, Benjamin Herrera, who was called the Black Pope of cocaine. Right. So he was a very well-known Afro-Colombian drug smuggler in Colombia. So he kind of introduces them into this world of drug trafficking. They get involved in, a little bit of marijuana, but then they realize, look, marijuana, it's too big, it's too smelly, the return on investment isn't that good. You got to move a real lot of product to make any kind of money. So Gilberto, who they call the chess player, because of his long-range visionary strategy, He was always thinking a couple moves ahead.
Yeah.
Thought about, hey, you know what? I think we can do better with cocaine.
He was the oldest brother.
He was the oldest.
Yeah. He was the one that they portrayed as like the shrewdest, the shot caller, the leader. Is that true to life?
For a while, and we can get into exactly when that changes and how it changes. So he has the idea to smuggle a couple kilos of cocaine up into New York. So they drive it up along the Panamanian Highway into New York, and sure enough, boom, it starts exploding in New York. So this is the early 70s. So you're getting cocaine in Colombia, I don't know, with everything, expenses, total process, transportation fees, maybe, $2,500 you're out of pocket.
Yeah.
But man, you're selling a brick of coke in New York in the early 70s, 50, 60, sometimes even more $1,000. So you can see how the money starts adding up quick.
Did they actually drive their first kilos all the way from Colombia?
Gilberto himself, along with another person, drove the 3,500, 4,000 miles up the Pan American Highway into New York. Took a couple weeks. Finally got it up there.
Wow. Yeah, I think bricks in the 70s were going for like 100.
At times.
Wow.
But, you're introducing this new product in there. So initially it starts off a little bit lower. And then as demand builds, the price goes up.
Yeah. Okay. So, and then they were off from there.
Then it was, you see and I think in Blow is a pretty good depiction, the movie Blow, where they start bringing like double-sided suitcases. They're strapping it to their bodies. They're putting it in shoes, right? So it's just it's the evolution of how the cocaine and the amount that's coming in.
Right.
And, sure enough, later on, a couple of years later, they're sending it in planks of lumber to the East Coast. And then, of course, in containers and, Norman's Cay, aircraft, containerized cargo, you name it.
Did they send people from Cali to live in New York, like they portrayed it in the show, to receive the work and then distribute it out?
They did, because Chepe Santa Cruz was one of those main architects that set up shop in New York, him along with Pacho Herrera.
Right.
Which they don't really depict in Narcos as much. But yeah, those two were key in setting up the distribution of cocaine in New York, as well as laundering money. And those guys wreaked havoc on New York for many, many years.
Okay, so how did the operation work once it blew up, and by the time you got down there, how it was portrayed as like a franchise? Like the Cali Cartel, I think people have myths about it. Like they said that a lot of times the people that were actually moving product out of that region didn't even know that they were moving Cali Cartel cocaine. How did it become this like international clandestine enterprise? Well,
as we said, you start off small, you get set up in New York, and then, as cocaine starts to, because first of all, no one was looking at cocaine back in the 1970s, right? The New York Drug Enforcement Task Force, the state police, everyone was concerned with what back then? Heroin, right? Heroin was the major problem in New York back then. So cocaine kind of flew under the radar, and so did these guys operating in New York. 95% of the overdoses and the hospital admissions back in the 70s were because of heroin. So these guys kind of quietly wrapped up a lot of money. So what do? With Gilberto, they start to expand, right? And back then, they also worked in conjunction with the Medellín cartel. A lot of people don't know that. These guys used to work together for many, many years until they had an issue and a problem. And then, of course, you had the major war between Cali and Medellín starting in 1988 that lasted 6 years until Pablo was killed. But they started setting up shop in all these other U.S. cities, right? So the agreement was that Medellín and Cali would work together, right? New York was Cali's and Miami was Medellín's. The rest of the country, the U.S., was up for grabs, right? It was fair game.
Right.
So if you wanted to traffic in L.A., it was fine.
Open market.
Open market. But New York exclusive to Cali, Miami exclusive to Medellín.
Were they sharing drug routes too? Like, would Cali give product to Medellín pilots? Would they, share different cargo spaces? Like when they were started shipping it, in big containers, or
Not really. The one common thing that they did use fairly often was Norman's Cay. So Norman's Cay was an island in the Bahamas.
That was Later's
set
route.
up by Carlos Later,
Right.
right? And that was like a transshipment and refueling mecca. And Carlos Later, if we always say that he doesn't get enough credit for that, but he basically revolutionized the cocaine trade by by setting up Norman's Cay, because back then these planes couldn't travel from Colombia to the U.S. with a load and then come all the way back. They couldn't do it without refueling.
Right.
So by him establishing that Norman's Cay as that transshipment and refueling strategic place, that just revolutionized cocaine trafficking into the U.S. And Cali also shared that, and they would fly some of their loads into, of all places, like Alabama and some other places in the Southeast, and then drive it up into New York.
Right. Mena, Arkansas. With
There were a lot of places.
The help of the CIA, Bill Clinton.
Today's episode is brought to you by my favorite online dispensary. I have been with this company literally for the last 3 years. From the beginning of this podcast, I am talking about Mood. Did you know there's an online cannabis company that ships federally legal THC right to your door? And they found a way to combine THC with carefully selected functional ingredients to target nearly every mood and health concern you can think of. I'm talking about Mood.com's incredible line of functional gummies, and you can get 20% off your first order at Mood.com with the promo code CONNECT. You guys, the holidays are coming up. These are amazing stocking stuffers. Like nothing that your in-laws want more than some functional gummies in their stockings. Am I right? They know it's more than just about getting high. You can get gummies like that anywhere. Mood's functional gummies are optimized to kick in as little as 15 minutes and take you to the exact mood that you're looking for. Whether that's Mind Magic gummies for deep work and creativity, PMS support, ladies and guys with ladies, to help ease cramps and balance mood swings. That's incredible. Or, of course, Mood's sexual euphoria gummies to help you feel ready for action and turn every touch into a full body experience. I can personally endorse those last ones. And everything ships discreetly to your door. No dispensary lines, no awkward conversations, break up with your drug dealer, just better days and nights delivered to your doorstep. And best of all, not only is every Mood product backed by a 100-day satisfaction guarantee, but as I mentioned earlier, listeners get 20% off their first order with code CONNECT, CONNECT. So head to Mood.com, find the functional gummy that matches exactly what you're looking for, and let Mood help you discover your perfect mood. And please don't forget to use our promo code CONNECT when you check out to save 20% off on your first order. Thank you so much, Mood.
What about, when did the Pacific coast of Colombia, Buenaventura, Nariño, all of those really clandestine port areas on the west side of Colombia, when did those start becoming export locations for Cali cocaine?
So historically and initially, the main route for cocaine coming into the U.S. was that Caribbean corridor, right? Up through the Caribbean Sea or into the Bahamas, even into, Haiti, the Dominican Republic, and into the U.S. But then, of course, as law enforcement is always adapting, they set up this thing called Operation BAT, Bahamas and Turks and Caicos. And they sent a lot of military assets. They sent a lot of other resources to that Caribbean corridor, which basically made it hot and made it a lot harder for them to smuggle cocaine there, certainly by air. And as I think you see in 1982, later gets basically kicked out of the Bahamas and he goes back to Colombia. So you see Cali says, okay, even before that, where do we go from here, right? So what's the most logical next step? Europe and Mexico. So when you start opening those routes into Mexico, either by aircraft or by vessel, you start to see some of that Eastern Pacific, those routes start to open on the western side of Colombia, going into Central America and into New York.
Was the Cali Cartel, how was it different from Medellín? Because the Medellín cartel was effectively just different drug traffickers from the Antioquia Valley, right? All of those characters that we just named. It was kind of more of just a loose federation of people sharing drug routes. Everybody had their own crews. Pablo might have been the strongest. Maybe it was the Ochoas. Maybe it was Gotcha, but who knows? Was the Cali Cartel more set up like a top-down structure? Like these are the heads, everybody works for us? Or was the structure similar to Medellín?
It was exactly that structure. So initially you had the 3 heads or leaders of the Cali Cartel, which they refer to as the Cali Godfathers.
Right.
Gilberto, Miguel Rodríguez, and Jose Santa Cruz. So later on, there's a major dispute which happens up in New York. One of Pacho's guys kills one of Pablo's guys, and there's a major war. Pablo wants to kill Pacho Herrera. He kind of goes back to Colombia, and he goes under the protection of the Rodríguez Orejuela brothers. And Pablo basically calls the Rodríguezes and says, either you have to kill Pacho, and you have to kill the assassin that shot up my guy. And they refuse. So Pablo basically told them, if you don't give me Pacho and you don't give me the Sicario, it's game on. We're going to war. So what they do is they bring Pacho in at that point in time. This is probably late 1987. And he becomes the 4th godfather, the 4th leader of the Cali Cartel. So you have those 4 guys at the top and a lot of, lieutenants and underlings under him. And at the time, between their legitimate businesses, their front companies and their whole drug trafficking organization, they had well over 10,000 employees that were working for them.
Wow. And they're like employees.
Well,
they're on salary.
Well, they had, through their legitimate businesses as well. They owned a chain of drugstores.
Right.
Drogas La Bravaja. They at their height had over 400 drugstores and employed 4,000 people.
Right.
They owned banks. They owned the soccer team, América de Cali. Right. All kind of different real estate and other businesses, not only in Colombia, but all throughout Europe as well. So, yeah, they were a massive conglomerate by then. And everybody knew that those 4 guys were the bosses, were the godfathers.
Okay, so their shit was a lot tighter than the Medellín cartel.
Much tighter, much more structured, much more compartmentalized. If you look back at Cali, they were run like, IBM, Dell Computers. You name any one of these Fortune 500 companies. They were broken down into 5 separate divisions, right? You had the military wing, which was responsible for corruption, recruitment of assets, security, killings. You had the financial division, which was responsible for, laundering the money. The trafficking division, obviously, for narcotics. And then they had the political wing, which was responsible for corrupting government officials, trying to get legislation changed, trying to get them on their side to kind of do their bidding. And then they had the legal division, which was the division that basically represented traffickers or money launderers or anybody else who got arrested by Colombian law enforcement or in the U.S.
Wow.
And everything was completely compartmentalized.
Right.
Right? So if you were in one division or one arm, you didn't know who was in the other arm or what they were doing. And that's how they ran their trafficking and money laundering cells as well. So take New York, for example, right? Their hub. You can have, and we'll just throw out a number, say 20. You have 20 independent drug trafficking and money laundering cells in New York. Okay? They report to either a cell head or a regional head who reports directly back to Miguel Rodríguez in Cali. If one of those people in one of those cells gets arrested, he can't talk about any of the other money laundering or drug trafficking cells because he doesn't know. He doesn't have any information. And even if you wiped out one of those 20 cells, you still had 19 operating there that nobody knew anything about. So they were set up like Al-Qaeda, right?
Right.
Almost like a terrorist organization, compartmentalized, completely insular. And that's what made them so hard to penetrate by law enforcement.
Yeah. Oh my God. They revolutionized the cell structure, which is now the way that all of drug trafficking basically is conducted around the world. They were the first ones to do it like that.
Well, every drug trafficking organization or criminal enterprise learns from the previous one that wasn't as successful, right?
Yeah.
So Cali learned from Medellín, right? So what was Medellín's MO, so to say, right? How did they conduct business? It was violence, threats, intimidation, murder, kidnapping, extortion, right? They assassinated government officials. They killed Rodrigo Lara, the Minister of Justice, in 1984. They assassinated Luis Carlos Galan, a presidential candidate, in 1989. They blew up the Avianca flight, killed 100 people, right? Blew up the DAS building.
They say that was Robert Escobar, Pablo's brothers. Yeah, Roberto. He says that was actually the government.
I have to.
The government killed a lot of people
horribly.
The Colombian government was brutal in their response, and so were Los Pepes. But anyways, I just want to point that out.
Los Pepes, yeah, we can get into that. They were extremely brutal. But Cali learned from that, and they saw that because what happened? Pablo and the Medellín cartel declares war on the Colombian government. They're the extraditables, right? They're committing all this violence. So Colombia goes after them, and they basically hunt down, they kill Gotcha, they shoot Pablo barefoot on the top of a roof of a building, right? So Cali learned from that. They're like, you know what? We don't want any part of this stuff. It's far better for us to buy people in key positions than kill them, right? So Cali's weapon of choice was what? It was to bribe.
Yeah.
And it proved to be even more effective and more lethal than killing these people because they got tons of government officials, military, police, judges, prosecutors. Hell, they contributed over $6 million to the presidential campaign of Ernesto Samper in 1994. So they basically bought the presidency.
Yeah.
So they had all these people in their pocket, which is why it was so hard to go after them.
Right. And Cali, when they were at their strongest, and citizens, when we were just there last month, would tell us it was so much safer than it is now. I mean, they would do cleansings where they would tell people in the colonias, the really dirty, drug-infested neighborhoods of Cali, like, hey, if you love your sons or daughters, keep them inside because we're coming to kill the riffraff. And so Cali, I believe, was a safe city.
Well, it depends what you consider safe because at the time, in the early 90s, right when we got there, even right before we got there, Colombia was the most dangerous country in the world. Right? It led the world in murders for years, homicides. It led the world in kidnappings by far for years. And, in Cali alone, in the early, 91, 92, you had 2,600 homicides over an 18-month span. So there was a lot of violence. There was a lot of killing. But, if you were a respectable, working citizen, yeah, it probably was pretty safe for you.
What were all those homicides over? If there's so much money going around,
just whatever, like you said, some of it's cleansing, some of it is remnants of the Medellín cartel trying to take over. But there was a lot of violence. It's been documented, and go back and look at the murders. There were a lot.
Maybe it's just different now. There's a lot more street crime now. Correct. There's a lot more petty crime. There's a lot more, they call it quality of life crimes. There's homeless people everywhere. There's huge oijas, which are like basically like Skid Row style, just drug. You can't even imagine like how dirty and drug infested a lot of these neighborhoods are in Cali now. So maybe that's what people say. Like there was a lot more murders back then, but they were like targeted and over like war, like actual cocaine war, where now it's a lot more chaotic. I think that's probably the difference.
Yeah, I have to agree with that.
Okay. So, wow. You're in Miami. How long are you in Miami for? And do you start working on the Cali case when you're in Miami, or how does that lead to then you going down to Colombia?
Great question. So I get to Miami, and like I said, for me to be a real DEA agent, I had to go to Miami because that's where everything was happening. And we knew that, or I knew back then, that the Colombian cartels, that was one of their main focal points and their main introduction points for cocaine. So we get there, and of course, Miami is dominated by Colombians. So there's cocaine everywhere. As I said, we used to say, you look up, it's kind of falling out of the sky. It's washing up in the ocean. So I started to work a lot of cases that were tied back to either the Cali and the Medellín cartel. Because in Miami, you're working some of the most significant investigations in the United States. If you're in Miami, LA, New York, you have major investigations. So a lot of those cases, they went back to Cali, they went back to Medellín. And so I had a pretty good idea of who these guys were. Even Pablo back at the time, the Medellín cartel, the Rodríguez's, they were on the radar. And my kind of niche when I was in Miami is I did a lot of maritime smuggling investigations, right? We had a good network set up. We had access to coastal freighters. We had access to go-fast boats. We had, undercover houses in the Florida Keys. So we would pose as transporters in offering our services to bring in large quantities of cocaine for these cartels or these independent organizations, bring it into Florida and then turn it back over to them. And of course, we'll get money, sometimes transportation fees, and we arrest everybody involved. So because of that, I started working exclusively on investigations related to Cali.
Okay.
And then I said, you know what, my next logical progression, if I want to be a real DEA agent, is I got to go to the motherland, right? I got to go to the mecca of drug trafficking, which was Colombia.
If Cali had an agreement to just keep New York, and Medellín had an agreement to exclusively control Miami, why were there Cali cells in Miami?
Well, and that's part of what starts the war, is because Medellín starts to infringe on New York territory, right? There's a couple killings up there. And of course, Miami or Cali is trying to introduce more drugs into Miami. And that's when you start having these problems. So of course, their agreement starts to unwind. And like I said, by late 1987, it completely falls apart and they're at war.
They're at war. And now it's free game. We're moving coke wherever
they're doing anything. Yeah.
Okay. If this cell structure, these distribution cells, one doesn't know the other, how are you able to crack that and actually get information that's going to move you closer to the Orejuelas?
Well, that's a lot of back then in New York or even in Miami, that's where law enforcement comes in, right? You have a lot of cooperating sources or assets. You're up on wiretaps. You arrest people. They start to cooperate and they start to tell you exactly how things are happening.
But if a cell that's working independently from another and they don't know any information about the source of the drugs, how are you able to get information if everything is so compartmentalized?
Well, that's where you're working one cell basically at a time, right? So I'll give you an example. In Miami, they were able to get up on a wiretap on one of the main cell heads that was running everything. I see. Right?
Like a manager.
The manager. He was basically running everything. Okay. So they had him on the phone. They had him talking to his underlings. They had him calling back to Colombia, speaking to Miguel Rodríguez. Oh. So through that, boom, you're able to completely dismantle an entire cell. And then you have you have other investigations, other sources, other wiretaps going on that you may be targeting other cells in that area. So you're not going to knock out all 20 at one time, right? It's kind of one by one. Sometimes you get lucky and you take down two. You seize drugs. Perfect example is Operation Cornerstone in Miami. Right. There was this massive load of it was over 12 tons, so about 24,000 pounds. It was the second largest cocaine seizure in history at the time. Came in fence posts, concrete fence posts sent from Venezuela into Florida in containerized cargo. And Customs and DEA back then, they found out about the shipment. We did survey. The whole Miami Field Division was doing surveillance on this thing for months, right? So somebody finally comes to pick it up. They follow them. They come over here to Texas. They arrest these guys. They seize drugs, and they're able to trace a lot of that back and dismantle a major part of one of the cells. So there's a lot of different ways that law enforcement is able to investigate them, to go after and completely dismantle those cells.
And was that Operation Cornerstone? Did those guys that they busted give up? They were the ones that basically were able to link the Cali Cartel directly to the Orejuelas, right? Like that's how you guys got warrants for them, right?
That cell head was calling directly back to Colombia and talking on the phone to Miguel and Gilberto Rodríguez Orejuela. So there was a very easy, direct link to that cellhead.
It seems so reckless. Why would Miguel be the one talking to the managers? Like, why wouldn't he have an intermediary? I never understood that. Like, Chapo was the same way. Chapo was on the wire talking to the Flores twins about drug deals, you know? Like, Mayo was never on the, he put Chapo in front of him to create a barrier, you know what I mean?
Because Miguel Rodríguez was the ultimate micromanager. He was neurotic in some of the things that he did. He was, like I said, the ultimate micromanager. So all of those either regional heads or cell heads reported back to him, right? They were calling to him all day long. And not only that, he was on the phone with the Mexicans, with Russian organized crime, with the Italians. And we could get into, this is part of one of the ways that we were able to identify where he's at later on, because he's up until 3, 4, 5 o'clock in the morning talking to these European crime families.
Wow.
So that's one of the, and that's a pretty good story. We could talk about that later.
Okay.
But remember, there's several vulnerabilities of drug trafficking organizations back in the 80s and 90s, right? One of them was transportation, right? They always had a need for pilots, boat captains, people who had access to freighters, because transportation was always an issue for them to get drugs into the country. Another one was moving the money back. The third one was communication, right? You have to be able to communicate with your cell heads or your regional managers, not only in the U.S., but in Central America, South America, Europe. So that was one of the ways that law enforcement was successful, by exploiting that communication, that vulnerability.
Because you couldn't just change phones like you can now. Like, everybody can just use an encrypted phone. You know, back then it wasn't so easy to just say, use a burner phone once and chuck it.
Well, they used phones. They used early on. They used pay phones, which was obviously problematic. But they used pagers and faxes. Right, Cali used a lot of faxes too. So we were able to get access to those and gain information, as well as by recruiting these high-level assets. Okay,
when you were in Miami, name, like, how many kilos do you think you busted? Like, what was like a memorable bust? Did you ever keep any of them?
Yeah, I got a lot of photos.
No. But I mean, did you ever take a few home?
No, come on. Of course not.
Oh, dude. Well, you're talking to Johnny Mitchell. No. Trust me. Just give me 5 of them.
It's not worth it. Because at the end of the day, you're going to get caught and you're going to end up going to prison, right? And,
did you know any DEA agents that did that?
Well, there were several agents that got arrested when I was there. And my first probably 6 or 8 months on the job, there were 2 people in my group that got arrested and went to prison for, some were IRS stuff, other was for, potential alleged corruption, selling information. But
they bit the forbidden fruit.
It happens. You're not going to deny it.
Did you ever do coke?
Never, absolutely not. That's disqualifying if you're want to apply to DEA, especially in any law enforcement agency. Immediate disqualification.
Okay, you missed out, but I'm glad you didn't. Anyways, okay. So tell us about like what was our average bust when you were in Miami when you were tracking down Cali?
Well, Cali, I mean, it depends what kind of cases you were working. I mean, sometimes we were just out there doing, what we call buy bust, where somebody would show up, bring you 5 or 10, 15, 20 keys of coke, and you would arrest them, on the spot and take the victory and move on. Other times we were doing the transportation cases, which would go anywhere from, 200 kilos at a time to, 1,500, 2,000 kilos in a shipment. So it varied depending on what you were doing.
Wow. Did you, and that must become so routine where you're like, oh, 20 bricks, like you called me for this shit. You know,
it's funny because we used to, when I got to Miami, we used to fight over like who was going to do the next case, because there was just so many, because you'd have these informants, these assets coming in, a couple times a day, sometimes saying, hey, I got this guy, Manuel wants to sell 5 kilos, and I got this guy who's got 10, and this guy wants to do 2. And it'd be like, okay, Chris, you're up. And I'm like, dude, I just did the one yesterday.
Right.
And somebody said, well, I did it the day before. I got court. So it was great. It was busy, but it was hectic because there was just so much cocaine back there in Miami.
Was it competitive, like amongst the officers? Like, going down to Colombia to chase the number one guys in the world like that, like how do you get that above like other people that might want to go down there? It seems like a coveted job.
I mean, there's a selection process. Obviously, they look at your evaluations. They look at the cases that you did. They look at kind of like the kind of person you are. Are you easy to get along with? Are you single? Because back then Colombia was you could only have a spouse, right? You couldn't have any kind of children. Right, because of the danger and stuff. Yeah. So that eliminated a lot of people who had kids. They couldn't go there. But there was an interview process. So they had a pretty good selection process. But back then Miami was kind of a popular recruitment ground because for any kind of foreign assignment in Central or South America, because people knew that if you were in Miami and you were a good worker, a good case agent, that you were busy, you traveled a lot. That was the other thing. We traveled extensively when I was in Miami. So, I had some guys that I was with in Colombia that were from like Detroit or Chicago, never been out of the U.S. in their life. They get down to Colombia, and you know how it is when you get to a third world country or a place that's, outside the U.S. and you're like, oh my God, this isn't what I expected. I'm not in Kansas anymore. So, in Florida, you got exposed to all that. We traveled extensively through Central America, South America, and the Caribbean. So it wasn't a big deal. So Miami was kind of a good recruitment ground for those foreign officers.
Did you learn Spanish?
I did. So my initial partner in Miami was a guy by the name of Alex Dominguez. He's Cuban, spoke fluent Spanish. He had access to all these crazy, Cuban sources and these Marielitos that came in. So just by kind of osmosis, I would pick up a little bit by hearing the debriefings and stuff. But it's a requirement by just about every federal law enforcement agency that if you get sent overseas, you need to go to language school and you need to be proficient. You need to pass a test prior to being deployed to that country. So if you're going to Russia, you got to learn Russian. You got to pass a test. If you're going to Thailand, same thing, or Colombia, Mexico. So we went to language school for a couple months. Yeah,
the Spanish of your character in Narcos he speaks great Spanish, like fluent Spanish.
Which is one of the reasons why he got the part, right? Because he had learned Spanish. Michael Stahl-David did a great job. I actually saw him in a movie last night when I was sitting in the hotel.
Oh, really?
But his Spanish was very good.
Better than your actual Spanish?
About the same. Maybe his was a little bit better, but his was really good.
Today's episode is proudly sponsored by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app. It's the only thing I use when I want to fire on action. I am a casual sports fan at best, so I leave the guesswork up to the experts. Instead, all I have to do with PrizePicks is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections. You guys know this by now. You're not playing against the Sharks. You're not playing against Vegas. You're not playing against some bookie in his mom's basement in New Jersey. It's just you versus the numbers. It is the easiest way to fire on action and 10x, 1000x your money sometimes. And check it out, PrizePicks has rolled out something new. It's called Stacks, meaning you can now pick the same player up to 3 times in the same lineup. Want to pick more on Steph Curry's points, 3-pointers, and assists? Now you can pick all of them in the same lineup. That is only on PrizePicks. And this is another feature I love. You can now follow other PrizePicks players directly on the app and copy their lineups in one click. I do this with my degenerate friends that are just studying this stuff all day. I just say, hey, Casey, that's right. Didn't even change his name. His name's Casey. I say, Casey, send me your lineup, scumbag. He sends me his picks. All I have to do is copy them. It's like being a stock trader copying a Wall Street insider. It's amazing. Whether it's a friend, a celebrity partner, or just someone whose pick you like, hit the follow button and check out every lineup they create in the new feed tab on PrizePicks. And remember, PrizePicks is ubiquitous to get action on football and basketball in more than 40 states, including California, Texas, and Georgia. They're in almost every state in the union, the ones that matter. You know what I'm saying? The contiguous ones. Contiguous. Look it up. And PrizePicks makes withdrawals fast and secure. They offer Venmo, Apple Pay, MasterCard, and more for quick and easy deposits into your account this football and basketball season. Check it out. Download the PrizePick app today and use code CONNECT, CONNECT, to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code CONNECT to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's all it takes. $5 and you're in the game. PrizePicks. It's good to be right.
Okay, so what year did you get the call that you were going to Cali?
So I applied, initially I applied in mid to late 1993. And the first time I applied, I didn't get the job. And I thought, like, what the hell's going on? I mean, how can I not get the job? I had outstanding evaluations. You know, my Spanish was pretty good back then. I had worked all these cases, you know, going back to the Cali Cartel. I knew all the players. So I called Steve Murphy, right? The one and only Steve Murphy from Narcos season 1 and season 2, who was integral with Javier Pena bringing down Pablo Escobar.
Right. Steve
used to work in Miami. I knew him, and I'm like, Steve, what the bro? How come I didn't get accepted? And he's like, dude, you got to get your hair cut, man. You know, the boss down here is like pretty strict. And I had hair down to the middle of my back.
No shit.
I didn't get a haircut from the day I left the academy until I got denied for my first job in Cali, which was over 5 years. So I had hair down to the middle of my back. I had, you know, I was wearing 3 earrings. I was like an extra at a Point Break, right? I looked like a surfer.
Was that purposely to be posed as like a drug
so
smuggler, drug trafficker?
Did a lot of undercover back then, and it was one of those things that, you know, you can do it, so why not go ahead and do it? And so I said, shit. So I went out one afternoon after I got that call, and I got my hair cut, right? I lopped off a good, 12, 14 inches of my hair. And, a week or so later, I got a call from the boss in Colombia, and he said, hey, Feistl, I heard you got your hair cut. I was like, oh, yes, sir, I did. He says, don't worry, things will work out for you. And then I ended up getting the job.
Okay.
So
93, Pablo is in his last days.
Right.
So now it's like, it's go time. Now it's time to take down Cali, the Godfathers.
So when I get selected, Pablo's still alive. So I'm thinking, man, I am going to Colombia at the absolute best time. I can work against Pablo Escobar, help bring him down. And I knew back then that once he went down, Cali was the major player because, there was a Time magazine article even back in 1991. They were on the cover of the Time magazine, the new kings of coke. So everybody knew that was the next progression. But by the time, I did all my administrative stuff, I went to language school, Pablo was killed.
Right.
So I get there, months after Pablo is dead, and boom, it's right into, okay, this is what you're being sent there to do. You're going to work on the Cali Cartel. You're going to work with the Colombian security forces to try to bring them down.
Okay, so you're in Cali, the surrender. If Narcos season 3, it starts with them making an agreement with the Colombian government to surrender themselves in exchange for getting minimal prison time in Colombia and them getting to retain all of their assets, all the billions of dollars legally and illegally that they've accumulated. Is that true to life?
Partially, yes. Partially. Okay. Now, why do I say partially? Because that was an idea floated out by the Cali Cartel, right? That was one of their 3 projects that they had, and this one was called the Submission to Justice Project, and I outlined this very well, I think, in the book. And that's what they wanted. They wanted to surrender to Colombian authorities. They wanted prison sentences of 5 years, but to serve no more than 3, and they wanted to keep all of their assets, right? It was never going to happen.
I just want to point out, that's exactly what Jorge Ochoa did. And he got to keep all of his money, and he spent 5 years in a Colombian prison, and he's living happily ever after. He is the most successful kingpin of all time, in my opinion.
Definitely very smart. The 3 Ochoa brothers took that deal.
Yeah, right? One of them got popped, Fabio. He just got extradited
but I'm saying back then, right? 1991.
Right.
All 3 of them agree to surrender to the Colombian government. Extradition is off the table.
Yeah.
And that they were going to do minimal prison sentences, right?
And that agreement was basically honored, though.
It was honored, but we'll see what happens. And gets into the question that you asked. So Jorge and Juan David do about 5 years. Mm-hmm. Fabio does a little bit over 5 years, okay? Pablo goes a little bit later. He surrenders. But what happens, right? Pablo goes to Catedral, right? It's a complete farce. The Colombian government is criticized all over the world for he builds this lavish, basically, condominium or house. He has his own security. Mm-hmm. He does whatever they want in there. And Colombia is the laughing stock. So is Cesar Gaviria, the president of Colombia, for years. So when the Rodríguez's float this out after that, Colombian government wants no part of it because they realize. Right. Gaviria realized, the president, that was a disaster, what happened with Pablo. We're not going to entertain that. Now, there were a few people in the Colombian government that thought, hey, you know what, we should probably do this, but it never gained a lot of traction. It was what they floated out. I think in Narcos, they kind of portray it more as it was more of like a done deal, and that was the thing. But I don't think it ever got any ground. And Miguel was very opposed to that. That was more of Gilberto's plan. So that never...
Okay, so the Orejuelas were too late.
They were too late after
kind of surrender deal.
The debacle, which was Pablo Escobar and Catedral. Yes.
I see. Okay, so now it's 1993, 94. That surrender it seems like they're just hoping that the Colombian government goes for it.
They are. So what happens, right? 1994 comes up, you have the presidential election in Colombia. So you have the conservative candidate, Andres Pastrana, and the liberal candidate, Ernesto Samper. So Cali's idea is, and that's another reason why, because the outgoing administration with Gaviria and the Attorney General, Gustavo de Grief, they were on their way out. No one was going to agree to it. They thought, you know what? Let's see if we can buy the next two presidential candidates, because if we do, they'll be more inclined to go along with our submission to justice program.
I see.
So Cali tries to help finance both of the presidential candidates' elections. Pastrana reportedly denies any of the money. Team Samper, they're all in. Mm-hmm. Cali Cartel provides, the low estimate is $6 million. Mm-hmm. The higher estimates are up to 10 or even over $10 million. $10 million, $6 million back in 1994. It's a lot of money.
In Colombia?
It's a lot of money, right? So they figure, let's do that. And then once we get our president in the Casa Nariño, which is the White House, they'll have to go along with our project. So, of course, they provide the funding. Samper gets elected, but he doesn't go along with it.
Okay.
There's too much heat. There's too much pressure from the U.S. Deal kind of falls apart, and they're basically told, don't get caught.
Interesting. Okay, so when you got there, had Samper already gotten into office?
So Samper won the election in May was the election. None of the candidates got 50%. They had a second runoff in June. He gets elected in June, and he takes office in August of 1994. So we are in Colombia, me and my partner, Dave Mitchell, before Samper. He's the president-elect, but he hasn't taken office yet. Okay.
All right. So, and by the time he took office, did it become clear to the Orejuelas that the deal was off? Or did he betray that deal later?
I think they knew because of the pressure that the deal was off, but word officially got to them a little bit later down the road. That, this is not going to happen. My hands are tied. Yeah. Basically, the administration is telling them. The U.S. is putting an inordinate amount of pressure on me and the government to go after you because, like I said, everybody knew Cali was the next target. So it wasn't, the timing was bad.
And did you know your targets were Miguel and Gilberto? Did you know that they were going to get extradited? Did they assume they were going to get extradited if and when they were caught? Or was it still kind of... Were they planning on even doing time in Colombia? Was the Colombian government planning on keeping them forever after you guys arrested them?
Yes.
Okay.
And this is why, because Colombia has this on again and off again relationship with extradition.
Right.
Right. So it was instituted, it was banned, it was reinstituted, it was banned.
Yeah.
So part of the reason, or the main reason, Pablo Escobar surrenders in June of 1991 is because he's given assurances that you will not be extradited, right? So they changed the Constitution to outlaw the extradition of Colombian nationals to the U.S. then. So from that period, from 91 until the time we're in Colombia, there is no extradition of Colombian nationals to the U.S. U.S. citizens, Canadians, whatever, fine, but no Colombian nationals. So they knew that if they got caught, they were going to spend time in Colombian prison.
Okay. So you're in Cali now. You've gone through all the training and the onboarding. You're obviously not undercover because you're a gringo. You're working with the military in Cali, right?
Police and the military.
Okay. In the show, you get assigned, you and Javier Pena. By the way, he was not with you. Explain that was the Hollywood version of what happened. But Javier Pena, who's the guy, Pedro Pascal's character, he was not actually with you in Cali busting the Orejuelas.
Correct. Yeah. So Javier Pena, he actually picked me up from the airport when I arrived there, but he left Colombia shortly after I arrived. His tour was over.
Right.
You know, him and Steve had taken down with the Colombian government Pablo, so his time was done. He rotates back to the United States, so he wasn't there. But
who was your partner? Who was like your main guy?
Dave Mitchell.
Okay, Dave Mitchell. He's your road dog. He's my partner. And in Narcos season 3, they referred to him. In Narcos season 3, I'm Chris Feistl, right? His character is Daniel Van Ness, not Dave Mitchell, because Dave at the time is still an active agent with the DEA. Right.
So they're not using his name. They have to change his name. Of course, to this day, he's still upset about that. But that's why he's referred to as Daniel Van Ness in the show.
I see. Okay. So what do you get thrown into? What are you doing when you first get to Cali?
So it's pretty funny. What happens is that, so since we had a lot of cases targeting the Cali Cartel when I was in Miami, we had a lot of good assets. And we had one asset that had face-to-face meetings with Gilberto. So when I get to Colombia, like the first thing, I go in pretty much the next day and I'm like, hey, so when can me and Dave go to Cali? We want to get rolling. I want to follow up on some stuff. And my supervisor tells me, we're not sending anybody to Cali right now. It's too dangerous. I was like, what do you mean? Why am I here? What are we doing? So they tell me the story. What happens is there were 2 Hispanic agents who were there before that were assigned to Cali. They had their photograph taken by a double agent, one of their sources who was actually working for the cartel. Photograph comes back to the embassy. They show it around. Hey, we know who these guys are. They're DEA agents. We know where they live. We know where they stay. We know where they eat. We know where they rent their cars. So we could pretty much have them at any time is basically what it's. So, knee-jerk reaction. Nobody can go to Cali. Right. And I'm like, well, how am I supposed to investigate the Cali Cartel if I can't go to Cali? I said, well, you have to do it from the embassy in Bogota. So I was like, man, this is not a very good strategy. So after, a few weeks of complaining and prodding, we're finally allowed to go to Cali, right? The ambassador gives us approval. DEA gives us approval. But we have extremely strict restrictions and guidelines, right? So listen to this. So they say, okay, you guys can go to Cali, but here's the deal. 1, you have to be back by nightfall. Can't stay overnight. Okay. 2, and this is important, in the book, and it plays a big part later on as well. 2, can't leave the police or military base without a police escort or military escort at any time, right? You can never do anything on your own. You have to be in the company of them. And the third thing, no unilateral action, no unilateral activity. You can't do anything yourself. You got to be with Colombians. You got to do it. So that was my welcome to Colombia moment. So we had to go over for the day. We met with the military, we met with the police, and we tried to establish a liaison with them and get things rolling.
Okay. So in the show, that first liaison, the commander of the military in Cali, turns out that he is on the payroll of the Cali Cartel. Is that true? Did that happen in real life?
It's true, but he was a Colombian National Police.
Yeah, right.
official,
He was Colombian National Police.
And he's a captain.
Okay.
And that is our, our initial contacts were with the military, but there's a lot of things that happen with the colonel in charge of the military bloque, and we kind of migrate more to start working with the police. And our initial police contact is a captain. And yes, he was one of the main spies for the Cali Cartel. How
long after you got there did you realize that?
Well, it's a good question, but we had our suspicions for a long time. Operation after operation after operation was compromised, right? We were on the ground a year almost before we had any real major success. And a lot of the operations that we did, it's like you see on TV, man. You go into some of these TV shows, right? You get this big raid planned, and you raid the apartment or the house, and you go in and you have good intel that somebody's there, and then there's nobody there. But there's a cup of coffee sitting there that's still hot, right? Or there's a cigarette burning,
right?
Or there's a piece of toast sitting there half eaten. So we were like, these operations are compromised. Our intel's good,
right?
But who's behind it? So this captain was always like asking a lot of questions. He was always hanging around our bunks, our little barracks where we were staying. So we were very suspicious of him from the start,
right.
But we can't do things on our own, right? We have to work with the police or the military. We have to go to them with the information and then launch these operations. So it took us almost a year to figure out and to circumvent that corruption, right? So we had to come up with a better plan or a better MO as to how we were going to do stuff.
Right. Okay. So did you eventually start giving him bad information, like intentionally giving this captain misinformation?
We did. And what we did is we started to violate. That's why I said we come back to that and it's important. We started to violate every one of those restrictions and guidelines that we had, right?
Yeah.
So we had to start leaving the police or military base without an escort. We had to go out on our own. We had to start working unilaterally to start doing this stuff to try to circumvent the corruption. So what we finally did, and again, this is, 11 months, almost a year into our tour, where I said we did hundreds and hundreds of raids where we basically came up empty. We started
what are you raiding? Houses, buildings,
apartments, anything in Cali where our intel suggests that one of the godfathers is at. So we start to utilize these vetted teams, right? These are polygraphed, highly trained, specialized police units that are detached to the CIA, to the agency. Because
so the CIA's there.
The CIA has a big presence there.
Wow.
But DEA didn't have any of our own vetted units.
Right.
So we had to utilize the vetted units to the agency.
I see.
So what we did is we started to bring these a very small group of these vetted police members from Bogota, 200 miles away, over land, to do some of these operations and surveillances, and completely discard the search block, who we were using because of the corruption. So that was our very first big break in going after Cali, is that we developed, there were three things that were very, that led us to arrest the Cali leaders, right? One of them was utilizing the vetted units. Two was the recruitment of very, very high level assets on the ground.
Okay, who are these assets?
We'll get into that. And then the third one was Dave and I basically being not allowed, but doing unilateral work. Okay, so with all of that, we recruit two high-level sources. They provide us with information on where Gilberto could be. And the information they give us is that, look, Gilberto utilizes this personal assistant who travels from his apartment every day to where Gilberto's at, answers the phone, relays messages, sets up meetings, and then he comes home. So if you follow him, he will lead you to Gilberto Rodríguez. Right. So we're able to locate, this guy's name's Flaco. We're able to follow him over the course of a week, and we follow him to an area in Cali, in central Cali, in the Santa Monica area, where we end up losing him, but at the top of the stairs, there's only 5 townhouses there. right? So we think he had to have gone into one of these townhouses. There's nowhere else. It's a dead end street. There's nowhere else he could have gone. So we raid all 5 and we basically find Gilberto. June of 1995, after almost a year on the ground.
Okay. Was he in a caleta when you went to his place?
Yeah, he was in like a rudimentary caleta. It was kind of like a room. You were able to move a television away, and behind in the closet there was an entrance, and he was there in the room with a pistol in each hand.
Wow.
And basically, when he saw the Colombian National Police there, he was like, "Look, I'm a man of peace. Don't shoot." And they didn't. And they arrested him, and Gilberto was arrested there.
Wow. Okay. Can you tell us who the sources were?
No, obviously not.
Still not.
No.
Okay. Famously in the show,
one has never been identified ever at any point at any time.
Was he? Can you tell us who what their functions were within the organization, at least?
They were members of the Cali Cartel, is all I can tell you.
Wow. So is that legally you can't do that, or just ethically?
Well, both. I mean, we never reveal who our sources are for obvious reasons.
Jorge Salcedo in Narcos season 3 is the main asset who leads you guys to take down Miguel and the whole operation. He's the head of security for the Cali Cartel.
Right.
Did you guys did he come in later?
Yes.
Okay, so this is different than the two sources.
Right after Gilberto's arrest.
Okay, got it. So, wow, you still to this day, they could be touched. They could, but their lives could be in danger if you revealed who they were.
Potentially, yes.
Wow. Okay, so you got the number one guy. You arrested him. That's exciting. That's exciting. So he's sitting in Colombian jail, fighting his case. What happens after that? How did you flip Salcedo?
So immediately after Gilberto's arrest, I'm thinking to myself and with Dave, my partner, we need to find another source like the two that we used. And it's a very long story about what happens, but we're able to get in contact with Jorge Salcedo, right? He's kind of looking for a way out of the cartel at this time. We're looking for a way in, and when we kind of hook up, it's the perfect storm, right? Mm-hmm. Because he's got that real-time actionable intelligence that we need. Right. And then, of course, we bring to the table, resources, the trust factor, and a couple of other things. So I finally make contact with Salcedo it would have been July, right? So let me backtrack a little bit. So I call Operation Cornerstone, which was the main investigation against the Cali Cartel in Miami. We go back and forth. Hey, you guys got to send me, anything you got, places where these guys hang out, names of assets, potential people to follow. So I get this list, and it says the first one is to follow Miguel's executive assistant, just like what we did with Gilberto. Mm. So me and Dave, now we're working with another Colombian vetted unit attached to the Navy. And we're following this guy around for well over a week, 12, 14 hours a day. He's not doing anything, right? And we're like, this is bad. This is bad info, right? And I talk about this very extensively in the book. So we need to go to option number 2. Option number 2 was to follow one of Miguel's attorneys. We go, we can't be sitting in a car again for this long. It's killing us. So option number 3 was call Jorge Salcedo, because there's a possibility he may want to cooperate. So that's how we eventually get to him. So I call him one day and I go, hey, I'm a friend of Eddie in Miami's. I think we should talk. And he's like, okay. I said, well, we're in Cali right now. Can we meet? And he says, meet me at 3:00 at this place called CIAT, which is a joint agricultural center an hour outside of Cali. Mm-hmm. Now, remember, at the time, he's the head of security for the Cali Cartel, right? And we know a little bit about his background, but not a whole lot. And a little bit that we do know is not comforting to me and Dave, right? Because Salcedo gets recruited into the cartel in 1989 because he has contacts with British mercenaries and soldiers of fortune, right? So he gets lured to this meeting with the Godfathers, and they basically tell him, hey, we know you have contacts with British mercenaries and soldiers of fortune. We want you to utilize them to kill Pablo Escobar at Hacienda Nápoles. Wow. So imagine you walk into a meeting with the four heads of the Cali Cartel and they drop this humongous bomb on you that they want you to go kill Pablo Escobar, right? What do you say to that?
Yeah, you can't say no.
Exactly. It's like The Godfather. It's a deal you can't refuse.
Right.
So he realizes that. And he basically says to himself, I'm not walking out of here alive if I say no. They just basically told me that they want to kill the biggest narco terrorist on the planet. So he agrees, and with the qualification that, okay, when Escobar's dead, I'm out. I go back to my normal life. I got my own company. I'm a well-educated guy. He was a captain in the military reserves. So, he was an expert in counterintelligence, weapons, communication. So he was like a very good pool for these Cali guys. Sure. And so that's how he gets drawn into the cartel. And they launched this operation against Pablo, this 2-helicopter assault on Hacienda Nápoles. Wow. One of the helicopters crashes, pilot's killed. One of the mercenaries breaks his ribs. So the operation gets shut down.
And it's actual British guys. That are attacking Pablo Escobar. That's wild.
Right out of a movie.
Wow.
Right out of a movie.
People don't talk about that in history.
No, but I outline it very, very well in the book. Okay. So you can get the whole story about how this happens. So the operation's a failure. Salcedo realizes now, man, I'm still stuck here in the cartel. So the sequel to the first movie is just as crazy as the second one, as to the helicopter assault, is that now Pacho Herrera comes up with the idea, look, Escobar is at Catedral. We know where he's at now. So let's drop a bomb on him. Right? How outlandish is that? So in these days, that's a possibility. Yeah. Drone strikes and shit, but they didn't have that back then. That's right. So they get Salcedo to travel to El Salvador. He has contact with the colonel there, and he buys 4 actually, MK-82 500-pound bombs. So they're going to take these bombs back to Colombia, and now they need a delivery device, right? So he goes to Miami, goes to Opalaca. He tries to buy this A-37 Dragonfly, which they're going to attach the bomb to drop on Catedral, right? Crazy, outlandish, right? But he's suspicious. He thinks it's like a law enforcement sting. It's not adding up. The plane is new. He walks away from it. But so they bring 3 of the bombs back to Colombia. The 4th one ends up getting seized in El Salvador. It turns into a major international incident. The colonel gets exposed. Salcedo gets exposed. He's now a military target by Escobar because now Escobar knows he's part of this plan to kill him. So he's stuck in the cartel again, right? So he needs that way out. We need that way in. Just to cut you off, I want to clarify the show versus what actually happened. 2 things. Did the corrupt military general in Cali, did he get killed by Miguel after he allowed Gilberto to get arrested? You mean the police captain? Yeah, the police captain. No. Okay, so that didn't really happen. Okay. Does not happen. Salcedo, but we do know, or at least I read, that after Gilberto got arrested, Miguel started to get paranoid and they started to kill a lot of people. Well, they weren't sure of who the source was, right? Who the informant was. And suspicion a lot of times in these drug cartels will get you killed. Right. Even if you're completely innocent, better to kill 10 people and get 1 rather than take a chance and let 1 get away. So, yeah, there were a few people that were eliminated. Yeah, okay. But that wasn't the reason that Salcedo approached you guys. No, but he sees the writing on the wall. Right. Right? He's like, I'm either going to get arrested or I'm going to get killed. But he needs to find the right way out. And he's the head of security for the Cali Cartel. And as he told us, trust no Colombians. Right? He wants no part. And I'll tell you when we first meet what he says. Okay. So So we go back to the thing. I call him. I'm in Cali. Let's meet. So I just told you his background. So he tells me on the phone, and I have it on speaker, and Dave's sitting there next to me. He says, meet me at 3:00 at SIAT. And I'm like, dude, are you kidding me? You're the head of security for the Cali Cartel. You're the counter security officer. I'm not going an hour outside of Cali to meet you in the middle of nowhere. Now, SIAT is in the middle of a sugarcane field. There's nothing around it. It's in the middle of nowhere. Right. So this smells to me like a complete, ambush or, we don't know what to expect. We're going to get kidnapped, killed, tortured, all three exposed, arrested by the police. So we're hesitant. We're weary. And I tell him, look, I'm not going to go out there. And I said, we need to meet somewhere closer to the city. He goes, impossible. If we're seen together, it's not going to end well for either one of us. So I'm thinking to myself, like, this guy's like, he's killing me. So finally, we agree to meet. I said, I'm thinking to myself, screw it, we're going to meet him. And he goes, come alone. I said, I'm not coming alone. I have to bring my partner. We don't go anywhere in Colombia by ourselves, especially with the counterintelligence officer and the head of security. So he agrees, and we finally meet one afternoon at SIAT, an hour outside of the city. Just me, my partner, Dave, and Salcedo. And I think they dramatized that fairly well in Narcos, although the meeting was much more extensive. In the show, they show us meeting for 5 minutes. We were actually out there for 3 hours the first time.
Wow. Did you have automatic weapons?
We did.
Okay. So you had automatics and sidearms. We
looked like Neo and Trinity.
Yeah.
When we went into the government-controlled building to free Morpheus. Dude, we had bags of weapons, automatic weapons, pistols, extra mags. Yeah. We were loaded as much as we could.
Had you been in shootouts up to that point in your career?
No.
You never had to bang it out?
Shot at, but not return fire.
Okay. Wow. All right. So after that meeting, did you guys lock in the agreement that he was going to help you guys take down the rest of the cartel?
So when we first meet, he says, this is a one-time meeting only. And, I will pass some information. That's it. All I want is safe passage for me and my family to the U.S. But, as we started to talk a little bit and we got into a lot of things, it was, the other thing, let me throw back. So when we first meet, we go to introduce ourselves, and I go, I'm Chris. He goes, yeah, Chris Feistl and Dave Mitchell. He knew exactly who we were because of the corrupt officer that we were dealing with, because he was reporting directly to Salcedo.
Right.
So he knew everything. Wow. So that was a little bit unnerving as well.
Wild.
Yeah.
Well, because they had the whole city under surveillance, right?
They had everybody under surveillance. Yeah. They had everybody paid off. So, so again, that was unnerving. We finally start talking, and when we were because we had talked to so many different assets, right? And a lot of these guys they're full of shit, right? They try to bullshit you. And so we started asking him a lot of questions that we knew the answer to, right? And everything that he responded to was right? What we knew to be true. So after 5 minutes, we're thinking, this guy's, he's on the up and up, right? We still have to be careful with him because he's the head of security. He could still screw us. But, and he started to realize that we weren't just, two young DEA guys that didn't know anything. These guys have a pretty good handle on, on what's going on. So the meeting turned into a 3-hour meeting. We talked about a lot of different stuff. And then by the end of the meeting, it was starting to get dark. He gives us information where he thinks Miguel is at, because we ask him, where's Miguel at now? He says he's in this Santa Rita area of Cali along the river, which we had intel that he was. So then we set up surveillance that night, but he agrees to meet with us the next morning. So what turns out with a one-time meeting turned into a long-term, multiple time meeting to get this information to go after Miguel.
Okay. Miguel's now, staying in different safe houses, huge penthouses with security everywhere. In the show, Salcedo ends up getting discovered and you guys have to shoot it out to basically rescue him from being executed by Miguel. Did that actually happen?
No.
Damn.
Did not happen.
Damn. Less dramatic.
One of the good liberties that they took.
Yeah. Okay. So how long after the meeting with Salcedo did you capture Miguel?
So we launched a raid 3 days afterwards, after the meeting.
That's it.
Right?
Wow.
But it's not successful. This is the first one, which they outline very, very well in Narcos, where we're drilling into the wall,
right?
And he escaped. So
was he in the wall?
He was in the wall.
And then did you guys get, just like in the show, did you guys get stopped by the Colombian police?
Exactly.
Wow. What if you had refused?
Well, we were already got arrested while we were there. Like they typed up a denuncia, like an official complaint against us, and they detained us and they locked us in the room. So I'll get to that. But so what he does is he tells us, look, he's in this part of Santa Rita, and this goes back to what we had talked about earlier, is that he says, look, I'm not quite sure of the building, but Miguel stays up until 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. He's always on the phone with the Europeans, with the Russians, with the Italians, coordinating money laundering and drug. So if you sit there in the hills and do surveillance, these buildings, whatever light goes out last is probably going to be where he's at, right? Genius idea. So Dave and I, we go up into the hills, we're sitting there for 2 or 3 nights. We're with binoculars, we're getting carried away by mosquitoes. It's very uncomfortable. And we kind of narrow down 2 floors in one building. We said, this has to be it because these are the last lights to go off every night. So now we have the building identified, or we think we have the building identified, but we don't know the name or anything. We don't know the layout. So Salcedo, as the head of security, tells us, everything that's going on. So we're getting this incredible inside information about how the cartel works, how their security apparatus works, the corruption that's involved, where they station security, perimeter security, everything. So he's like, look, to get into that neighborhood, we have perimeter security set up here. And it consists of, several different operatives there. So anybody who comes down, and Miguel would always stay in these places where there was one way in and one way out that were backed up to the mountain.
Right.
Because they figured they have to come past this certain choke point, and our surveillance will see them.
Yeah.
And they're not going to be able to come down the side of the mountain because it's too steep. So he's like, you're not going to get in there unless I pull the security. So he agrees to pull the cartel security for like a 15-minute meeting, which gives Dave and I a chance to drive through where the security's at the checkpoint. Go in there, we identify the name of the building, we get the lay of the land, and we're able to come back out. And that's how we're able to identify his location. And then we're able to put together an operation. So once we do that, Dave and I try to, we did our recon, we got our information. That's when we call the specialized units from Bogota to come over.
And how many people in this specialized unit?
Well, we only used a handful, about 5 or 6. But once we got there, what our plan was then is, and then we had to learn again not to do this the next time, is once we got there, and we brought some other troops from Bogota, these anti-narcotics troops, but they had no idea where they were going or what they were doing. They were just told, go to Cali, follow these guys, and they'll tell you what to do.
Right.
So we got to the building, we surrounded the building, and then we called the search block to come in because they have a prosecutor that's embedded with the police, and they would come and coordinate the operation, but only after we had everything secured.
Right.
So, of course, this turns into a disaster.
Right.
We're in the apartment for about 10 hours. We can't find them. So what happens initially is the prosecutor comes from the search block. He doesn't bring the necessary paperwork to be able to raid the apartments. So he has to go to the regional office, get the paperwork, fill it out, and then come back. In the meantime, we're sitting outside the building, surrounding the building for 2 hours before we get access to it, right? So we're thinking Miguel's either gone, he's walked out of the building, he's in another apartment, or he's inside a Caleta and we're never going to find him. So that's when we finally get in there, that's our thought process. So we know that the executive assistant who's with Miguel, he's there. So we know this is the place. And Salcedo also tells us during that initial debriefing all this great inside information that Miguel uses like a 20 to 25 line telephone switching station, right? So if you had to get a hold of Miguel, you never had his real number. You would call a number, the number would go here, and then it would get transferred to wherever he was at. So you never knew where he was. He went through that central switching station. So he said, if you look for that, he's going to have one of two executive assistants. He gave us the names. Says Miguel's hypoglycemic. He only eats, certain kinds of food at certain hours to control his blood sugar. So look for a lot of fresh fruits and vegetables in the refrigerator. He's neurotic, right? He's OCD. He only uses Panasonic phones, hard lines. I don't know why, because he liked them. So when we get into the apartment, the first thing we do, we look, okay, there's the 25 line switching station. We go to the refrigerator, there's the fresh fruits, right? I look, we find the Panasonic phones. And then the last thing, the executive assistant's there. I ask him, what's your name? He says, Jorge Castillo. That's him. So we knew that was the right apartment. And we knew Miguel was either in a Caleta there or he had gone because it took us 2 hours to get in.
Right. Now, the prosecutor that didn't bring the right paperwork, was that on purpose? Was he being paid off?
Most likely.
Okay.
So what happens later on, and you can form your own opinion on that, is that during this time, we're constantly going outside, we're on the phone, we're communicating with Salcedo, and we're getting sporadic pieces of information over these 10 or 12 hours that we're in the apartment. And, the first information we get is, he was there, I don't know what happened. A couple hours later, we get he's there. He's in the apartment. He's in a hidden compartment. So we're going around, knocking on walls and floors and ceilings and trying to move bookcases, everything. We can't find anything. So at one point he calls back and he says, hey, is there a big red wooden desk in the office? And I say, yeah, the only thing we found was a written down piece of paper with our license plate of the car that we drove in Cali. Wow. That was given to him by the corrupt captain.
Yeah.
I said, there's nothing else. He says, inside the desk, and this is very well portrayed in Narcos season 3. He said, inside the desk is a hidden compartment, and it has Miguel's most sensitive and confidential papers. You got to find those because that'll give you more time to stay in the apartment with the prosecutor. So I thought, we're looking for buttons. We're, now we can't find anything. So one of the agents that's there with us, Jerry Salome, he picks the desk up and crashes it to the ground, and it completely breaks open. And we look, and I crunch down, I look in the back, and there's a hidden compartment in the desk. And it has these 3 thin leather briefcases. So we pull them out, we give them to the colonel who's there, and they start going through the documents. And these documents are highly explosive documents. Unbelievable. Corruption-related information, information about the financing of the presidential campaign.
Wow.
We found a list, check this out, 2,800 corrupt officials. A list that tells you the amount of, and this is in one raid, right? Canceled checks where Miguel, when he paid people by check, he used to make a photocopy of it. He kept it, these documents.
Why would he do that?
So that he knew who he paid and he had leverage over people, right?
Oh, right, sure.
So one of the checks was made to the campaign treasurer for Ernesto Samper, right? So this opens this huge explosive investigation into the campaign financing. So gives us a little bit more time. Finally, he gives us the information. Look, Miguel is in a compartment in the bathroom because he knows this because he's meeting with Miguel Rodríguez, his son. Right. So he has the information. And of course, they're telling Salcedo because Salcedo's the head of security.
Right.
He's trying to coordinate this. And by now they're trying to formulate an extraction plan to how to get him out.
Right.
So we're like, oh, shit, there's like 4 or 5 bathrooms in this place. So again, we go back, start knocking on walls. Finally, what we did is 2 other guys went down to the apartments below and the apartments above where we were at. We were in apartment 402. And we start taking measurements of all the different bathrooms. So we finally get to this one half bath, the washroom, and we realize the distances and the measurements are shorter than the other ones, right? So I open one of the cabinet doors to the sink and it hits the toilet. So I'm thinking to myself, yeah, this is horrible construction, right? So we've been going full tilt for days, weeks on end, right? We're there for a year. We're tired, we're exhausted, we're not thinking clear. And then, of course, it hits us. Well, it's probably because this wall has been modified and moved forward. So then we start drilling, just like in the show, drilling, taking the sledgehammers, and then the prosecutor comes in and he basically says, you are to cease and desist. You're conducting a unilateral operation in Colombia and violating Colombian law. Stop immediately. Come with me. He shuts down the raid. He goes to the apartment. The keys are there. He locks the front door, puts the keys in his pocket, gets his little typewriter, starts typing up a formal complaint, a denuncia against us. So we're basically...
Does he have guards with him? Like, could you guys have been overtaken by firepower?
Well, in Colombia, the prosecutor runs everything. Okay. Right? So if he tells the police, you can't seize that, you can't do this, shut it down, we're going home, you do it, right? In the U.S., it's different. So, yeah, they were all kind of armed police there. So we...
Okay, so obviously this guy is fully paid off. Now, did he know that you had the documents seized from the desk, those explosive documents?
He knew they were there. So what happens with that is the colonel looks at them and he realizes how explosive these things are. He basically takes them and says, I got to go take these to General Serrano, the head of the Colombian National Police. And he leaves with the documents.
Okay, before.
So that's when things start to really, go downhill. But so what happens is the captain from the search block is there during the raid, the corrupt one.
Right.
So he's reporting back of what's going on. So they knew, the cartel knew, the prosecutor knew that we were getting close. So that's what happened.
Did you guys, but you guys had to leave. Is that when you got arrested?
Yes.
Wow. So you were de-armed?
No, we were not de-armed. They just told us they typed up the complaint, and after it was done, they shut the raid down and we were escorted out of the building. Okay. So now we're thinking we're going to get thrown out of the country by the ambassador. Salcedo's going to be killed. So it was probably the lowest point of my law enforcement career that day. Not because we didn't catch Miguel, but because we let Salcedo down and we thought that he was going to get killed.
But at least you had these documents that literally changed Colombia. I mean, it literally blew the lid off of the whole thing.
Mm-hmm. So what happens after that is we tell the Colombian National Police, look, stand guard outside the apartment, stand guard outside the building, because he's got to come out. And when he comes out, you can grab him. So what happens? The corrupt captain goes back into the apartment. They break Miguel out of the Caleta. They escort him out of the apartment into the garage, into the trunk of the car, and they drive him away. So he escapes. So the next day, we get summoned to the ambassador's house. And I'm like, this is it. I'm packing my bags. We're out of here. And ambassador goes into a tirade. You know, what were you guys doing? You violated all my rules. You were, like we go back to, you were working unilaterally. Yeah. You know, you're destroying property because we were hitting with the sledgehammer and everything. But then he finally talks about the documents. So we only saw a few of them, but we knew they were explosive. So he kind of tells us some of the stuff that was found, and it's, again, highly volatile. And then he tells us what happened is that the police went back into the apartment. They found the Caleta broken open right where we were drilling, right where we were hitting it. So that was the only thing that saved us from getting expelled from the country by the ambassador. So Miguel escapes, and now we're back to zero.
Okay. So does that expose Salcedo? Like at that point, did Salcedo tell you guys, hey, these guys assume that I'm the one that's leaking this information, or?
So Salcedo's on the very, very short list of potential suspects. Right. We lose contact with him for about 5 days. At that point, we think he's been killed. We're not sure. There are people who suspect him. Mainly Miguel's son suspects him. Some other security people that work for Salcedo suspect him. But his cover is that, look, I didn't know where the apartment was. I didn't know anything about the Caleta, where it was. And I certainly didn't know anything about the desk where those documents were.
Right.
So he's able to convince Miguel during his little interview or slight interrogation that, hey, I don't know any of this stuff. It's not me.
Right.
So Miguel believes him.
Because Miguel wasn't even telling Salcedo where he was staying.
Salcedo only knew the area, but he knew where the perimeter security was.
Mm-hmm. That was his job.
Right. And because he knew how Miguel operated, that he knew the one way in, the one way out, the apartment backed up to the mountain. Right. So he kind of had it narrowed down to several buildings, but he didn't know which one.
So it was it was Miguel's son who was basically the only one that knew where Miguel was staying, and his assistants.
Yes.
Okay.
For the most part, yeah.
Right.
Now there may have been one or two other people, but that was it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So what happens next?
So we finally regroup. About 5 days later, he tells us, look, I am under suspicion. Miguel has moved, and I'm not sure where he's at. The only thing he knew is he was somewhere downtown, like in the Wanabu or the in the Cristales area of Cali, right, which is not far from the Intercontinental. So he says, give me time. Let me see what I can do. So over the period of another week or so, now, by this time, too, Salcedo is completely relinquished from his primary security duty, right? He's in charge now of the secondary or the outlying perimeter security, right? So he doesn't even know where the inside perimeter is, only the outside. So he says, I can't go anywhere near the building because if I'm seen, they're going to know. Mm-hmm. So he says, but I know the area and let me do some work. So he does some recon from up in the mountains, and he says, based on where the security's at again, he's like, look, these are the only two buildings that he could possibly be. So he sends photographs of these two buildings to us in Bogota by Avianca courier. And he goes, look, I think these are one of the two buildings. He's got to be in one of them. And by that time, we had developed independent information of our own that suggested one of the apartments in the building was owned by or was registered in the name of Miguel Rodriguez's paramour, right? So we thought
his what?
Paramour, he had multiple wives, girlfriends. Right. This was like one of his one of his unmarried, or by this time she was married.
One of his broads, yeah.
Yeah. So we think we have an idea. So we reconvene, we go back to Cali, and we start doing complete unilateral operations, right? Me and Dave only. We're meeting with Salcedo multiple times a day on our own. We're doing our own surveillances at nighttime. We're doing our own recon of the surrounding areas. We're thinking about potential approaches and plans and strategies as how we're going to get to this area, if in fact it is. So after a couple of nights of surveillance, Salcedo finally tells us, he goes, look, I forgot to tell you one thing. He changed his executive assistant. He got rid of his old maids. And now the two domestic employees that are there are two new Afro-Colombian maids from Buenaventura. Mm-hmm. So we're sitting at this elevated park about maybe 1,000 meters away. And there was a lot of people there at night. So, we're hanging out, we're drinking beers, but we're looking at through binoculars to these apartments. And the good thing is that it was a big tourist area, just even for locals. There were no Americans in Cali at the time, just the Colombians. They'd go up there, they get some street food, they drink a beer, they look at the burning sugar cane in the distance, look cool. You could see the city all lit up. So we were there with about 75 other people doing surveillance. And, about 1 o'clock in the morning, I happen to be looking through the binoculars and a light comes on. And I'm looking through the binoculars and I see two black maids in the kitchen that I think is the kitchen. And it looks like they're cooking or washing dishes. So I'm saying to myself, 1 o'clock in the morning, maids, black maids, cooking, washing dishes, this has to be the place, right? Wow. So
how far away is this from you guys?
About 1,000 meters.
1,000 meters.
A little over half a mile. So, but we're not sure the layout of the apartment, how many apartments there are per floor. So we do some undercover inquiries with a realtor. We find out that it's 19 floors and that there's only one apartment per floor. Very luxurious.
Yeah.
So with that information, we're able to call the vetted units, and we're able to launch an operation there, which is pretty funny because we start out with about 40 people, right? We have to insert in this area. We have to climb up a hill. We have to go through this drainage tunnel. We have to basically rappel, come down the side of a mountain at 4 o'clock in the morning at pitch black conditions.
To go around the security
to
units.
circumvent the security, right? Because there's no way we could go like in a military convoy through there, and they would immediately call me, go in the collector.
Yeah.
So only 6 of us make it down the mountain. And we end up hitting the apartment with 6 people. We knocked the door down. And what happened is we had special approval from the Attorney General of Colombia to basically do a no-knock entry to knock the door down.
Right.
Because in Colombia, most of the time, you knock on the door, and if one of the kingpins is there, they tell them, hey, law enforcement's here, the police, the military, get in the collector. And they hide them away, and then they come and answer the door.
Right.
And we knew that these collectors were so highly sophisticated that we would probably never find it. So we had special approval. We knocked the door down. We go in, and then one of the Navy commandos that we were using, the Navy equivalent of the Navy SEALs, but on the Colombia side, he gets Miguel Rodríguez right as he's entering the collector. Like it's like in a movie, right?
Totally.
It was perfect timing.
Totally.
Had we been a minute later, we probably would have never got him. But he basically grabs him, pulls him out of the collector, and that's how we arrested Miguel.
And that chase where you guys had to you were getting followed by the police in Cali to get Gilberto or get Miguel onto a plane to Bogota. Did that happen actually?
No, but you bring out a good point though, I have to bring that up, and I didn't discuss it, is that like me and Dave, when we were there, we were followed all the time.
Okay.
By the cartel. They followed us. They wanted to identify our sources, and they wanted to kill the sources. So we were staying in safe houses, but they followed us a lot. But that instance, no, that was more for
dramatic effect. Right. Okay. So after Miguel gets arrested in what month in 1995?
Miguel's arrested August 6th, 1995.
Okay. So after that, is the show portrays that they think they're good. They're just going to be in prison for a little while in Cali until they can buy their way out, make a deal with the government. They stayed in prison in Colombia until 2003 or 2004.
Correct.
What was that about? Did they get indeterminate prison sentences in Colombia? And then why were they eventually extradited and given new sentences in the United States? Like, kind of just sum up how that all culminated.
So in between the Gilberto arrest and the Miguel arrest, we arrest Chepe Santa Cruz in July of 1995.
Right.
So in that 3 months span, you have Gilberto, Chepe, and Miguel go down June, July, and August. So they're in prison doing their time. A short time later, Colombia passes legislation, they change the constitution, and they re-implement extradition again.
Right.
But this time it's for crimes committed after December 17th, 1997. So we couldn't go back in the U.S. and use any evidence or information that we had obtained during that time frame. So we basically had to start a new case against any drug traffickers that we wanted to try to extradite. So while they're in prison, you know, I think Narcos shows that very well. They're scheming, they're planning, they're running their business basically from prison. They're on the phones, they have visitors coming in and out.
Okay. So they didn't stop drug trafficking.
They did not.
Like at all.
Did not.
Okay. How long were their Colombian prison sentences initially?
I think they were initially sentenced to 21 years. But, you know, in Colombia, if you decide to cooperate or surrender some assets, you can get quite a substantial time cut off your sentence, right? So in the meantime, the U.S. continues to develop evidence against them. They're indicted in the U.S. for crimes committed after that December 17th timeframe. And now they are eligible for extradition.
Right.
So Gilberto, I think, is first in December of 2003. Gets extradited to the U.S., and then Miguel follows suit a few months later in early 2004. So they end up in prison in the U.S.
Okay, were you part of that second case?
No, I was not.
Okay.
But I was there because I did 3 tours in Colombia, 94 to 97, 99 to 2002, and then 2004 to 2010. So I was back there the third time when Miguel was extradited.
Okay. So after, in the wake of the arrest of the Godfathers initially, your arrest of them, then the documents shortly after, the documents tying them to the corruption of the president, Ernesto Samper, that comes out. That explodes Colombia. How did that affect the extradition law? Because of that scandal, did Samper come back to try to save his image and implement the extradition law?
Well, there were several things that led to that. We would call it the Proceso 8,000, which was, Process 8,000, which was the Colombian investigative number for that. And part of the reason that investigation was open was, one, the seizure of those documents. There was also documents seized from Miguel and Gilberto's accountant, Guillermo Palomari, who's very well portrayed in season 3 of Narcos. And there was other information in the narco cassette scandal, right? There were these cassette tapes which showed Gilberto and Miguel talking on the phone openly about contributing, millions of dollars to the campaign. So those three things lead to this investigation against the president. He completely denies it. He says, if it happened without me knowing. In the meantime, the campaign treasurer, Santiago Medina, and the campaign manager, Fernando Botero, are both arrested. They both cooperate. They both say that the president knew that they were accepting money from the Cali Cartel. But, they open an investigation. It goes to the accusations committee, and Samper basically gets absolved. Right. He is the John Gotti. He is the Teflon Don of Colombia. So he remains in power, doesn't lose the presidency, no more investigations into that. And that's basically it. So, but in the meantime, I think people start to realize, look, this corruption goes all the way to the top. Yep. It's like the OJ thing, right? The evidence is overwhelming, even if he gets, totally not found guilty. But they implement extradition, and that's how that starts. Okay.
I know you weren't a part of it, so you can't really speak to, but no, you could speak to how, I guess, after Miguel and Gilberto and Chepe get arrested, how did they continue their operations? Were there lieutenants still in Cali that were overseeing or were they talking directly to their distributors in all of these different countries, the mafia in Russia, in Italy? Like, how did they keep running shit when they were locked up?
Good question. So what happens is that Miguel's son, William Rodríguez, who's portrayed in Narcos by the name of David, though.
Right.
He becomes the de facto leader of the Cali Cartel.
Right.
And through messengers going into the prison, through cell phones. Remember, this is not like a prison in the United States, right? These guys are living lavish. They have their own maids. They have cooks. They have
hookers,
suites. They, televisions, alcohol. Hookers. They have everything. Exactly. So it's very easy for them to run their business by cell phone, by visitors, and with William Rodríguez on the outside.
Okay, got it. So he was running shit. Does he eventually go down?
He does. He gets indicted in the U.S. He goes on the run for a few years. He surrenders. He cuts a deal. He surrenders in Panama, goes to the U.S., gets sentenced, I think, initially to like 20 years plus.
He must have given up information, right?
Cooperated, agreed to testify against his father, Miguel.
No way.
If necessary. He didn't, though.
Oh, okay.
He didn't have to because they had pled guilty. Agreed to testify against Gilberto, his uncle. Identified a bunch of assets, that were seized. Probably some estimates are like $300 million worth of assets. So he got his sentence cut to about 5 years. Probably did 4.5.
In the United States?
In the U.S.
Like, how is that possible? It's such a joke.
He surrendered. He cooperated, and gave up a lot of assets. Gave up a lot of other information.
That's how the game's played. The bosses, everybody else gets killed, does life. The bosses.
It is what it is.
So then they get extradited. So all these wiretaps. I'm assuming they got wiretaps on Gilberto and Miguel when they were in prison, making deals.
Not to get into sources and methods, but they had incredible amounts of evidence to show that they continued to traffic from prison.
Okay. Yeah. So then they get extradited to the U.S. I think they both get sentenced to 30 years.
Correct.
In the U.S. Did they give up any information? No. How were they able to avoid getting life without?
Well, it's a good question. So, because of the extradition treaty that exists between Colombia and the U.S., as well as other countries with the U.S., there are provisions in there that for countries to extradite their nationals to the U.S., there are certain things that we have to agree on. We meaning the U.S. One is no death penalty.
Right.
Okay. The other is generally no more than 30 years in prison. So the maximum that you generally get, and it's extremely rare if it goes over 30, is 30 years.
Wow, that's fascinating. So in the case of Chapo, that was a very exceptional sentence, life with no parole in ADX Florence.
Right, but he's not going to live more than 30 years, so.
Right. Okay, interesting. So, but the Mexican government would have had to basically make a deal with the U.S. prosecutors, like, we'll finally extradite Chapo after his third escape, and you can give him as much time as you want.
Well, as long as it's not the death penalty or more than 30 years.
But they did give him more than 30 years.
What did he get?
He got life plus 30 years.
Right. How old is he?
They got him when he was like 52, 55.
He's not going to do 30. He's not going to make it.
Yeah, of course he's not going to make it, but it's but it's still on the books. That's an illegal sentence.
There's other things too. If you're expelled or you're just kind of thrown out, like some of these other traffickers are from Mexico, that doesn't apply then, right? You're not being extradited. So
I see. Okay. Yeah, but just in my opinion, a lot of the Colombian guys got off relatively easy compared to, the Mexican drug lords, the modern Mexican drug lords.
Well, a lot of them cooperate and they get lesser sentences.
For sure.
And that adds up. But if you take it on the chin, you're gonna get a heavy sentence.
So they each got 30. Gilberto just died in prison. I think a couple years ago, he died in American prison. I think they surrendered all of their assets.
They agreed to forfeit. Check this shit out. They agreed to forfeit $2.1 billion with a B assets.
$1 billion
in dollars, right? And one of the reasons that you can argue that they don't cooperate or they didn't cooperate is they have a very large extended family in Colombia. Mm-hmm. Many relatives, sisters, cousins, and you're not going to cooperate against high-level people when you have all those family members down there. So,
sure,
you take it on the chin, you do your time, and you let the family alone, so to say.
Yeah. So they turned over all of their legitimate businesses too, I'm assuming.
Supposedly, right? But you know how that works in the underworld and in drug trafficking is I'm sure that they have assets that they didn't identify or expose, that they had certain businesses that the U.S. didn't know about. Right. They had, real estate and properties that they owned.
So do you think the sentence was already worked out more or less before Colombia allowed America to take them?
Well, I mean, I think everybody knew they were going to get 30 years.
Right.
I mean, that was...
Right.
Even Fabio Ochoa, when he got extradited, I think he only, he got 30 or maybe 31 years.
Right.
So everyone was envisioning that that's what they were going to get.
Right. Okay. So, and then Miguel might get out if he can live. I think his sentence is coming up. His out date is coming up. So
he's probably 82 at this point. Mm-hmm. He doesn't have much time left to serve, and I'm gathering he probably doesn't have that much time more to live. So it's possible that he gets out. Mm-hmm. Yes, possible.
Wow, what an absolute joke the justice system is. There's people that got caught with, a couple of keys of heroin in the U.S. that are doing as much time as those guys. What absolute bullshit. What have you said at the top of the episode that the war on drugs is not really a war. Did you become disillusioned with it, What did you take away after your time seeing what's going on in Colombia now, and how the guerrillas, the former leftist guerrillas in Colombia, are now narco armies, and they're exporting 10 times the amount of cocaine every year that the godfathers of Cali and the Medellín cartel ever did? What's your takeaway from the war on drugs and your time, your career, your time in the field?
Well, like I always say, I don't think it was ever a war on drugs, right? If at best it might have been a skirmish, because if you're going to war, you're going to put every resource that you have into that. And let's be honest, law enforcement in the U.S. underfunded. We don't have enough resources. You don't have enough prosecutors. You don't have enough prisons.
I totally disagree.
No, but I'm just saying, right? If you're gonna do a war, you're gonna do these things,
right?
Right, and we don't have that. You're gonna bring back minimum mandatory sentences, right? So if you get arrested with X amount of cocaine or heroin, you're gonna do X amount of time.
But they already have that.
Yeah, but they kind of do away with it now. The judges have way too much discretion in sentencing, right? This defund the police, no cash bail. This is not a war. You want to talk about a war? And I'm not saying one way or the other, but Trump administration is now blowing boats out of the water. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, if you want to call that a war, or you want to go down that path, okay, that's a little different, right? So I think that is the big difference.
Sure. By the definition, you're right. That is what Trump's doing now, is more of a war.
Right.
Whether it's winnable or not, I think we can all kind of agree.
Declaring them as a terrorist organization.
Right.
Bringing sanctions back, bringing these material support charges to a terrorist organization.
Right.
Doing that. That's now you're getting closer to the definition of what would be a war. So that's why I say it's not really a war. It's
right.
It's more of a skirmish. Now,
but America likes to paint everything as a war on whatever.
Right. Well, it's a catchy phrase and stuff.
Yeah.
But But we always say in DEA and the government that we may not win the war, but we'll win every battle that we fight. Right? Medellín cartel, Cali cartel, North Valley cartel. You go after these organizations and these kingpins. Given enough time, law enforcement's going to get you, and you're going to arrest. You may lose the overall war, so to say, but you'll win the battle.
Yeah, for sure.
And now what's going on with Colombia and Venezuela? Yeah, it's completely different, right? You have these left-wing administrations that are not in favor of enforcement. They're providing refuge and safe haven to some of these drug cartels, these foreign terrorist organizations, as they're now classified. You have remnants of the FARC. You have the ELN. You have the Clan del Golfo. You have the Cartel de los Soles in Venezuela. And Venezuela now is seen as this kind of safe haven for a lot of these organizations to go into. They set up shop, they traffic, they're complicit with the Venezuelan government. The Venezuelan government provides them with high-grade military weapons, and they're sending out a lot of this cocaine now from the north coast of Venezuela as well as Colombia. So it's a big problem. As we talked about, there's a lot more cocaine being produced now than even 4 or 5 years ago.
Right. Yeah. If you think cocaine is a problem, I don't think it's that big of I don't think people should do it, but it's just like, I think one of the Colombian presidents said, like, how many people die of alcohol? A lot more. So, but we can talk the politics of it and the morality of it all day. I mean, the point was the worst part about the drug trade, in my opinion, in Latin America is the corruption, the deep-seated corruption. It really starts from the politicians, right? Like, there's no cartels in the United States overtly because there isn't that much corruption. It's the fault of the government. It's the Mexican government. That's what allows a lot of the poverty that encourages people to join criminal organizations, and it's what allows the violence that's become out of control in Colombia, in Venezuela, in Mexico, obviously. It starts with them. You know what I mean?
I agree. And I say that all the time in interviews and podcasts that I do, is that these drug trafficking cartels or any illegal cartel, you cannot exist without corruption. Right? And the analogy, just like you said, it was a perfect analogy, and I say it all the time, is that's why you don't see these major cartels in the United States, right? You don't see these drug kingpins operating for 10, 15, 20 years in the United States because you don't have that level of corruption. And the only reason they're allowed to exist is because of that corruption. And corruption and money laundering, it waters every tree because if you're able to corrupt government officials, military, police, protect your operations and continue on with your illegal activities, who's going to stop you? I mean, look at Bolivia, right? There's no U.S. presence there. DEA was kicked out of the country, and you look at Venezuela too, the same thing. So as long as you have corruption, these cartels and these criminal organizations are going to continue to operate.
Chris Feistl, a part of the war on drug, part of narco history. Truly an honor. Let me show the camera that book. I cannot recommend it enough. Go get After Escobar, Chris Feistl and Dave Mitchell. I mean, yeah, dude, it's a fascinating part of history, not just drug history, but like the history of the Americas. Go get it everywhere. It's like a bestseller. So you get it on Amazon. That's where people buy shit.
It's on Amazon. You can get it off our website too, www.afterescobar.com. We got signed copies. I think if you're a Narcos fan, you're a true crime fan, you're a fan of just Colombian cartels. I think you'd enjoy the book. And not only that, it gives you a great history of what happened in Colombia from the 80s and 90s, not just on the drug side, but on the political and government side as well. Yeah,
exactly. And I actually think the Cali organization is a more fascinating structure than even the Medellín cartel. So After Escobar, go get it. Chris Feistl, let's stick around. Let's do a bonus episode because I want to hear about what happened after the Cali Cartel and the different organizations that you took down in Colombia in the late 90s, early 2000s, and your work up until you retired in 2014. You did a lot of work after this. So head over to Patreon, patreon.com/The Connect Show. Chris Feistl, had a lot of fun, man. That was great.
Thank you. It was a great conversation, Johnny.
All right, you guys, we'll see you over at Patreon.